Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to talk about, this is kind of part two of what I spoke on earlier in a session before this, on how unforgiveness affects our health. And so what I'm going to talk about in this session is what Jesus says about forgiveness. And so, forgiveness is a huge theme that Christ talks about over and over and over. So I'm going to talk about some key aspects today of this. I'm going to talk about 7 key aspects of Christ's teachings on forgiveness. And I think that this will really, it'll really get you to understand and let go some of this. There's so many people in the world that carry unforgiveness and they don't realize, and I'm speaking to me. Anytime I do a lot of these teachings, I'm speaking to myself. I'm learning more myself as I teach you about this. So first, Christ commands us to forgive, okay? Jesus taught his followers to forgive others. And even in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus instructs his disciples to forgive not just 7 times, but 7 times 70. And what he's saying here is that it's unlimited, okay? It's unconditional. It's not really the number, okay? It's a state of condition of forgiving. And as I said in the previous one, it's not meaning that you condone their behavior. I don't condone the man who cost me to lose all of my retirement. I don't condone a man who called me his friend and then 2 days later bashed me to several of my friends for no reason. I don't condone that behavior, but I forgive both of them because we're human. I've done a lot of things in my life that I've needed forgiveness for because I'm human. But the Spirit of Christ that lives inside of me, that I have a relationship with, that I get to experience every single day, teaches me that I have to forgive. I have to let go. And I'm going to be honest with you, unforgiveness, as I said previously, cripples people. It leads to health problems. You can look at research on breast cancer, as I mentioned before. So number 2 is leading by example, okay? Leading by example. Jesus himself exemplified forgiveness through his own actions, okay? One of the most profound examples in history was when he was crucified on the cross. Despite experiencing immense suffering, even when he was on the whipping post, to the cross, right? Jesus forgave those who persecuted him. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Even when the thieves beside him said, if you're really God, then get us down, get yourself down and get us down. And he said, you'll be with me in paradise. Because even though they looked to their circumstance, they were actually looking to God himself, who was on the cross beside them, to get them down, right? And even if you go back to the example of Peter getting out of the boat, it was his faith of getting out of the boat that Jesus came and saved him, right? So number 3 is the parables on forgiveness. Jesus often used parables to teach important lessons, okay? And forgiveness was a constant reoccurring theme, right? For instance, the parable of the prodigal son. And if you're writing down, that's in Luke 15:11 through 32. And what this does is this highlights forgiveness and acceptance of his wayward son, okay? Symbolizing God's unconditional love and forgiveness for humanity, okay? That, to me, is just constant leading by example. There's many examples of forgiveness in the Bible. Number 4 is the relationship with God, okay? Jesus emphasizes the connection between forgiveness and our relationship with God, right? In the Lord's Prayer, he teaches his disciples, forgive us for our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us, which is Matthew 6:12. This indicates that our forgiveness is tied to our willingness to forgive others. And there's numerous times where it says, forgive not, for you will not be forgiven yourself. I don't want God to not forgive me. So why should I not forgive others? Right. And it's hard. I'm not saying that this is easy, you guys. This is not easy, but it will cripple you. It will destroy marriages. It will destroy business partners. It will destroy kids. You name it. Okay. Number 5. Okay. Healing and reconciliation. Jesus himself recognized that forgiveness brings healing and reconciliation. Okay. He taught that if someone had something against us, we should seek reconciliation before presenting our offerings to God. Let me tell you this. This is super hard. This is super hard. That's Matthew 5:23 and 24. Forgiveness opens the door to restoration and renewed relationships. Let me tell you this. No matter what you do, okay, remember what I've said over and over and over in our previous video, that the forgiveness is not about them. It's about you. You can't control whether they forgive you. I went to people and said, hey, I'm really sorry for what I said. I was hurting. I was emotional. And they didn't receive it, right? But it wasn't for them, okay? I've had people hurt me really bad. And my wife looks at me and said, do you really need to understand? Like, do you trust God enough? You know, Pontius Pilate, when they brought Jesus to him, he washed his hands and he said, I'll have no part with this, right? He didn't want that to be on his consciousness, right? And so there's a lot of healing and restoration. You know, my wife and I were apart for 4 years or 3 years, 3 or 4 years. And the healing and restoration that went to forgiveness, I went and dove into, and I went and confessed everything and asked for forgiveness, not just of some things, but for all things, right? And that's regain. I remember a funny situation. We were in counseling when we first started back, and my a shout out to Pastor Dwight Rogers and Jeannie Rogers. Dwight said, okay, Lisa, on a scale of 1 to 10, you know, how much do you trust and forgive Michael? And she said a 7. And I'll be honest with you, I thought she was going to say a 3 or a 4. Okay. But I believe that asking for forgiveness in every aspect of life. And look, I did not deserve that. I did not deserve any of that. And I remember one of my friends, pastor friends of mine, said, you know, you're not lying to anybody. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm lying to everybody. He said, no, you're not. You're believing the lies that the enemy has told you is the truth. And that's what we do when it comes to forgiveness. Oh, I can never forgive that person. You know how many times I've heard people say that? They're speaking death over their own selves by not being able to forgive people. Okay? You know, I said it before and I'll say it again. Forgiveness opens the door to restoration and renewed relationships. Okay. Number 6 is the power of love. Jesus taught us that forgiveness is rooted and grounded in love. Okay. Rooted and grounded. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. And pray for those who mistreat you. Luke 6:27 and 28. I don't like the sound of that. I'm sure none of you like the sound of that, right? Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. You know, one of my good friends, Pastor Jim Baker, you know, he was persecuted by people that the things they said just didn't make sense. But he said, I just have to love them. I'm called to love. I'm called to forgive. I'm called to move on in my calling and my destiny, right? And a lot of times we focus on the wound of unforgiveness and what the person actually did rather than focusing on Jesus, right? And so number 6 is divine forgiveness. According to Christ, God's forgiveness is freely offered to all who seek it with a repentive heart. Okay. It's not just the words you say, it's a heart thing. You hear people say all the time you want to be around, like-minded people. No, I want to be around heart-minded people. The mind is very deceptive. Okay. The mind is very deceptive. And I teach people all the time, whether it's a CEO or an NFL player or a dad or a mom that I'm ministering to, or it's a big group, if it's athletes of any age. that it's all about your heart. Where is your heart? Where's your mindset? You know, Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. Okay. Believers are offered redemption and the opportunity to experience God's forgiveness. It's that act that gave us that ability to forgive because he forgives us. Okay. So it's important to remember forgiveness is not easy. Okay. It's a personal journey. Okay. It may take time. It may take time. Following the very Spirit of God and how he represents forgiveness and peace and reconciliation is our hope. Our hope and our foundation is built on the things of God. God didn't become a man and die just for religion. He became a man and died so that we could have a relationship with him, so that our heart could be set on forgiveness. And I said it over and over. Forgiveness is never hard, is never easy. It's not easy. But again, I'm going to reiterate this again. Remember, it's not about the person. It's about you. I want to be in good standing with God. If God tells me if I can't forgive others, he can't forgive me. I don't know about you, but I want nothing to do with that. I want nothing to do with anything that separates me from God, right? I had an old pastor friend of mine that said, we have a tendency to keep God here, okay? I want him here, right? I want him here. I want to have a deeper relationship with him. I want to know his forgiveness. So let's recap these really quick before we end, okay? Number one, these key aspects of Christ's teaching on forgiveness. Number one is command to forgive. Okay, Matthew 18, 21 and 22. Lead by example. Luke 23 and 34. Parables of forgiveness. One main one, Luke 15, 11 through 32. I would tell you to read some of these in the Amplified version. They're so deep and so rich. And then number four, relationship with God. Matthew 6 and 12. Okay, number five, healing and reconciliation. Matthew 5, 23 and 24. The power of love. Number six, okay? Luke 6, 27 and 28. And then divine forgiveness. The very act that Christ died for us. He died for our forgiveness. You know, I love that we have that direct access to him, right? It allows us to focus on him and not the person who offended us. It allows rejection. I struggled with rejection really up till just about a year and a half ago, right? And it crippled me, right? I was constantly making things worse because I wanted to figure out what was wrong. And then one day my wife said, do you really have to know, or do you just trust God? I was like, I just trust God. She says, then don't try to figure it out. It's not for you to figure out. God opens doors that no one can open and closes the ones that no one can close. And so I hope that this encouraged you. Continue to subscribe and to our channels and watch this information. But the difference between the wisdom and the knowledge you learn is the action that you take. So walk in complete forgiveness. Thanks for listening.